In this video, I'm sharing 7 true trucker horror stories, encounters on the road that drivers swear were real. If you think you're safe behind the wheel, think again. On the open highways of America, truckers carry not just loads of cargo, but also stories that never leave their minds. Stories of strange lights in the sky, figures walking where no one should be, and shadows that follow for miles. This first story comes from a veteran driver who once took Route 93 in Nevada, a lonely stretch of road that hides more than just desert. He swears that what happened that night still haunts him every time he looks in his mirror. I have been a truck driver for more than 20 years, and in that time, I have come to love the loneliness of the road. There is something steady about the rumble of the tires, the glow of the dashboard, and the endless ribbon of asphalt stretching through America. But in late October of 2007, I took a night run from Salt Lake City down to Las Vegas that left a scar on me. It was a refrigerated load, a tight schedule, and I knew the trip would be long and quiet. I left the terminal around 8 p.m., my rig humming as I joined the highway south. The desert in that part of the country feels endless, like the land itself has been abandoned by time. The sky is huge, the stars brighter than they ever seem in cities, but the air holds a weight you cannot explain unless you have driven it yourself. I told myself it was just another night, just another run, nothing to worry about. I adjusted my mirrors, checked my gauges, and pointed the nose of the truck toward Nevada. By midnight, I had crossed the state line. My logbook showed steady progress, and I was making good time. I stopped briefly at a small rest area near Ely, Nevada. The place was nearly deserted, with one broken light flickering over cracked pavement. I stepped out to stretch, the desert air cold against my skin. The silence there was thick. Even the insects seemed to avoid the place. I leaned against the bumper for a while, watching the stars. They looked too sharp, as if the sky itself had been cut open. I smoked a cigarette, finished it quickly, and climbed back into the cab. My truck had always been my safe place, the space I trusted most in the world. But as I turned the key and pulled back onto Route 93, I could not shake the feeling that something in the darkness was paying attention to me. The road stretched out flat and black, lined with sagebrush and sand. Every so often, a jackrabbit darted across, but mostly it was empty. After another 30 miles, I checked my mirrors. That was when I noticed something unusual. Far behind me, on the shoulder of the road, a dark figure was walking. I passed too quickly to get more than a glimpse, but it stayed in my mind. Hitchhikers were rare in those parts, and it made no sense that someone would be walking there at night. I pressed on, thinking I would forget about it. But 10 minutes later, I glanced at the mirror again. My stomach tightened. The same figure was there, still walking, and somehow closer than before. I was driving 60 miles an hour, yet it was keeping up. My grip on the wheel tightened. I told myself I was tired, that my eyes were tricking me, but a cold feeling began to crawl up my back. An hour later, I could no longer ignore the tension in my chest. Fatigue was pressing down, so I pulled into a wide gravel pull-off to check my tires. I killed the engine and stepped into the dirt. The desert air was colder now, and the silence pressed harder. I walked around the rig with my flashlight. The tires were fine, the trailer steady, but when I came around the back, I froze. There were footprints in the dust, human footprints, bare feet, leading straight to the trailer doors. My heart pounded. I scanned the area with the flashlight, but there was nothing. No one. The footprints simply stopped at the locked doors, as if whoever made them had vanished into the metal itself. I rushed back into the cab, slamming the lock shut. As I sat there catching my breath, the cab shifted slightly, the way it shifts when someone heavy climbs into the sleeper. My skin went cold. I didn't turn around. I just started the engine and drove. Back on the road, I forced myself to keep moving. But every few miles, my eyes betrayed me. I looked at the mirror. The figure was still there, always the same distance behind, no matter how fast I drove. Sometimes it looked sharper, clearer, as if I could almost see its face. Sometimes it blurred, stretching into the night. The strangest part was that other vehicles passed me now and then. Their headlights swept across my mirrors, yet no one slowed. No one honked. No one acted like they saw anything unusual. I began to wonder if I was the only one who could see it. My truck, my home on wheels, no longer felt safe. Every shadow inside the cab felt alive. Every creak of the frame felt like a hand brushing against me. At 3 a.m., I spotted the glow of another rest area up ahead. My nerves were raw, but I thought maybe I could park among other trucks and shake off the fear. I pulled in slowly, relief washing over me as I saw 2 rigs parked near the edge. But the moment I shut off my engine, the lights blinked out. Not dimmed, completely vanished. I rubbed my eyes, convinced I was losing my mind. But the lot was empty now. My headlights lit only cracked pavement and weeds. The other rigs were gone, as if they had never been there at all. The silence pressed down again, heavier than before. My ears rang. I sat frozen, hands gripping the wheel, staring into the mirrors. I was too afraid to check the sleeper, too afraid to move. Dawn finally came, slow and pale over the desert horizon. As the sunlight spread, the pressure lifted. The fear that had wrapped around me like a second skin began to ease. I drove the last stretch into Las Vegas without stopping, my body stiff and my mind buzzing. At the delivery site, I stepped out of cab on shaking legs. I walked around the trailer, needing to see for myself. The dust still clung to the doors, but the footprints I had seen in the night were gone. Not faded, gone completely, as if the desert itself had erased them. I told myself I would never take Route 93 at night again, and I have kept that promise. To this day, when I look into my mirrors on a dark stretch of road, I feel that same chill. I know something can follow you, no matter how fast you drive, and no matter how empty the road seems. Highways at night are places most people never see. They're endless strips of black, cut by headlights and ruled by silence. Truckers know that when the rest of the country sleeps, the road comes alive with things that don't always make sense. This second story comes from a long-haul driver who swore that what he saw along Interstate 70 in Colorado was not meant for human eyes. I started trucking in the late 90s, and I've seen my share of strange things across America. But nothing has ever matched the night I crossed the Rocky Mountains on I-70 back in December of 2012. I was hauling furniture eastbound, running heavy and slow, trying to get through before a winter storm hit. It was around 10 p.m. when I began the long climb past Glenwood Springs. The Rockies are a different kind of road. The grades are steep, the curves sharp, and the weather can turn in minutes. I had chains in the box and extra diesel in the tanks, but I could feel the weight of the mountains pressing on me. Snow lined the shoulders, and ice glittered faintly in the beam of my headlights. The CB was quiet, just a faint hiss of static. Most drivers had already shut down for the night, but I had miles to cover before I could sleep. Driving there always gave me a sense of being alone in a place older than time. The cliffs towered above, the road wound like a ribbon through stone, and the black forest crowded the edges. That night, I felt like the only living soul on the mountain. Around midnight, I pulled into a rest area near Vail Pass to stretch my legs. The snow crunched under my boots as I walked a short circle around the rig. The air was sharp, freezing my breath before it left my mouth. Not a single car sat in the lot, though the plows had cleared it just hours earlier. The building stood dark, no lights shining in the windows. A rest area that should have been open all night sat silent as a tomb. I tried the door once out of habit, but it was locked. My footsteps echoed louder than they should have. Something about that emptiness unsettled me. I had stopped in that same lot dozens of times before, and never once had it been completely deserted. As I climbed back into the cab, the sense of being watched pressed on me. I shook it off, fired up the engine, and rolled back onto the highway. The higher I climbed, the heavier the snow became. It swirled in the headlights like white smoke, coating the pavement in patches of slick ice. My wipers beat steadily, and my hands ached from gripping the wheel. It was then that I saw her, a woman standing on the shoulder of the highway, dressed in a white gown that looked too thin for the weather. Her hair was long and dark, blowing across her face. She didn't raise a hand, didn't move, just stood staring into the lane. I passed her quickly, my stomach lurching. No one should have been out there, not in those conditions. I checked my mirrors. She was gone, not shrinking in the distance, gone completely, as if she had never been there. I told myself my eyes were tired, that the snow had played tricks on me. But the memory of that pale figure stayed with me as the road curved higher and higher into the mountains. At 2 in the morning, I began the descent east of the Eisenhower Tunnel. My nerves were stretched thin, every curve demanding focus. But inside the cab, the air grew colder. My breath fogged the glass even though the heater was on high. I felt it then, the shift of weight in the sleeper, as though someone had settled onto the mattress behind me. My chest tightened. I didn't turn my head. I couldn't. I just kept my eyes locked on the road, my hands gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white. Every bump, every rattle of the rig seemed magnified. The silence inside the cab pressed against my ears. I wanted to believe it was only my imagination, that the exhaustion of mountain driving was getting to me. But deep inside, I knew I was not alone anymore. Truckers live by their mirrors. They're the eyes that watch what we cannot see. That night they betrayed me. Every few minutes, against my better judgment, I glanced at the passenger side mirror, and every time I saw her, the woman in white, seated on the catwalk between my cab and trailer, her dress fluttering in the freezing wind. She faced forward, her head bowed, her hands folded neatly in her lap as though she were waiting. No matter how I blinked or shook my head, she remained. Only when I forced my eyes forward and refused to look did the mirror turn empty again. But the longer I drove, the stronger the pull to glance back became, as though she wanted me to see her. Near Idaho Springs, I finally caught sight of other headlights. 3 trucks ahead, their taillights glowing faint through the snow. Relief washed over me. I wasn't alone anymore. I pressed harder on the pedal, closing the gap between us. But as I crested the next hill, the road ahead went black. No trucks, no taillights, only empty asphalt stretching into the storm. The CB crackled suddenly, a faint voice cutting through the static, but the words were broken, garbled. I reached for the mic, but the sound cut off before I could answer. The cab felt colder than ever, and I could sense her presence heavy behind me, waiting. By the time the first pale light of dawn broke over the plains near Denver, I was exhausted beyond words. The snow thinned, the mountains fell away, and the flat land stretched ahead. The pressure in the cab eased, but not completely. I pulled into a truck stop on the outskirts of the city. My hands trembled as I set the brakes and killed the engine. For a long time, I couldn't bring myself to check the sleeper. I sat frozen, staring at the windshield as the rising sun burned red against the sky. When I finally gathered the courage to step out, I walked around the rig slowly. The snow had coated the catwalk between cab and trailer, yet there were no footprints. The surface was perfectly smooth, but when I opened the sleeper door later, I found a single long strand of dark hair lying across the pillow. I threw it out with shaking hands, but the memory never left me. To this day, I will not drive I-70 through the Rockies at night. I know she is still there, waiting for someone else to climb the mountain alone. There are highways in America that most drivers avoid after dark, some because of steep cliffs, others because of old legends whispered at truck stops. One such place lies along Highway 50 in Nevada, known as the loneliest road in America. This third story comes from a driver who braved that route alone, and what he experienced one summer night has never left him. I had been running freight out west for most of my career, and in the summer of 2015, I picked up a run that sent me across Nevada's Highway 50. Anyone who drives for a living knows that stretch has a reputation. Locals call it the loneliest road in America, and they're not wrong. It runs through miles of empty desert, with nothing but sagebrush, dust, and mountains in the distance. No big towns, no steady traffic, just silence. I left Fallon late in the evening, hauling a full trailer of dry goods bound for Utah. The sun was dropping low, painting the desert red. I knew the run would take me through the night, but I didn't mind. I had been driving nights most of my life. My truck was solid, my tanks were full, and my logbook had me clear to make it across. But as the sky darkened, I felt something different in the air. A weight, the kind of feeling that makes the hairs on your arms rise even when the wind is warm. I had no reason to be uneasy, but the road ahead seemed to swallow more than light. It felt like it was swallowing me. By midnight, I had been driving for hours without seeing another vehicle. No headlights behind me, no taillights ahead, just black road stretching like a ribbon across endless desert. The stars above were brilliant, scattered like diamonds, but even they seemed too far away to comfort me. Highway 50 has long, straight stretches that can hypnotize you if you aren't careful. I tried to stay sharp, sipping coffee, adjusting the radio, checking my gauges, but after a while, I realized something strange. The mile markers weren't right. I had passed marker 178, then 179, then 180, but the next one read 178 again. At first, I thought I had misread it. That fatigue was messing with my eyes. But a half hour later, it happened again. The numbers repeated, as if the road itself had folded in on itself. I told myself it was a trick, maybe vandalism, maybe just poor signage. But deep inside, unease was spreading, slow and steady, like cold water filling my boots. It was close to 2 a.m. when I first noticed them. Headlights in my mirror, faint at first, then brighter, as if a car was slowly catching up. Relief hit me. I wasn't alone anymore. The lights followed me for miles, never gaining enough to pass, never falling back. Just steady, always there. After an hour, I started to wonder. No car follows a rig that long without making a move. I slowed slightly, expecting the vehicle to pass. The lights slowed too. I sped up. They stayed with me. When I reached the next rise in the highway, I checked the mirror again. The road behind me was empty. No headlights. No car. Nothing but darkness stretching back for miles. A knot formed in my stomach. I kept my eyes forward, but every few minutes, the lights would reappear, closer this time, then vanish again. They weren't just following me. They were playing with me. Sometime after 3 a.m., I spotted a glow up ahead. My chest eased with relief. A small gas station set just off the highway, its sign flickering faintly. I pulled in, rolling slowly over cracked pavement. The building looked half abandoned. Windows boarded, pumps rusted, a single light buzzing over the lot. I shut down the engine, climbed out, and stretched my legs. The desert air was still, unnaturally quiet. Then I noticed the tracks. fresh tire marks in the dust, circling the pumps, then vanishing into the desert where no road existed. They weren't mine, and they didn't make sense. I climbed back into the cab quickly, locking the doors. In the mirrors, the buzzing light over the station flickered once, twice, then went dark. I sat in silence until my hands stopped shaking, then eased back onto the highway. By 4 a.m., exhaustion was clawing at me. My eyes burned, my muscles ached, and fear had drained whatever strength coffee had given me. That's when I saw them. A line of trucks up ahead, 5 or 6 in convoy, their taillights glowing bright red against the black road. Relief surged. I wasn't the only one out here after all. I pressed harder on the pedal, eager to catch them. But the closer I got, the stranger it became. Their taillights didn't flicker with bumps. Their rigs made no sound, no rumble of diesel, no hum of tires. And then, as I closed the gap to 100 yards, every single light blinked out. The road ahead was empty again. My breath caught in my throat. I knew then that what followed me wasn't human, and it wanted me alone. The night stretched on endlessly. The road, the desert, the stars, all felt like they were circling me, keeping me trapped in a loop. I checked my GPS. The screen flickered, froze, then showed me at the same point on the map I had passed 2 hours earlier. My fuel gauge began to drop faster than it should have, as though the road itself was sucking the life out of the rig. The cab grew colder, my breath fogging the glass. In the mirrors, the headlights appeared again. Only this time, they weren't behind me. They were beside me. Lights where no road existed, keeping pace with me across the open desert. I didn't look again. I stared straight ahead, hands locked on the wheel, praying for dawn. At 6 a.m., the sky began to pale. The first rays of light spilled over the horizon, burning away the stars. My GPS blinked back to life, showing me just 20 miles outside Ely, Nevada. My fuel gauge steadied, as though nothing had been wrong. I pulled into the first diner I saw, stumbling out of the cab like a man who had been underwater too long. My body shook with exhaustion, but I was alive. When I circled the rig, I stopped dead. Dust clung to the trailer, but across the back doors, someone had traced words with a finger. For words, written clearly in the dirt. "You are not alone." I scrubbed them off, but they burned in my mind. To this day, I avoid Highway 50 whenever I can. And when I can't, I never drive it at night. Because I know that whatever roams that stretch of desert is still there, waiting for the next driver who thinks they're alone. Some highways are dangerous because of weather, others because of thieves. But there are places in America where the danger has nothing to do with man or nature. This fourth story comes from a driver named Danny Mercer, who swore that what happened to him in Texas in 2018 still keeps him awake every time he shuts down at night. My name is Daniel Mercer, though most folks in the trucking world just call me Danny. I started driving long-haul rigs when I was 22, and by 2018, I had been doing it for almost 15 years. I hauled everything: dry van, refrigerated, even livestock once or twice. I loved the road because it gave me freedom, but I also learned that the road has a way of showing you things you never asked to see. In September of that year, I took a late-night run through Texas, heading south along Highway 281 towards San Antonio. It was a humid night, the kind where the air feels heavy on your skin, even with the AC cranked high. My trailer was full of auto parts bound for a distributor, nothing unusual. I had made the trip a dozen times before, but this night was different. This night, something followed me out of the dark, something I still can't explain. Highway 281 cuts through stretches of farmland and scrub. The night was quiet, only my headlights carving through the darkness. Around 11 p.m., I saw it for the first time. A black dog stood on the shoulder of the road, bigger than any dog I had ever seen. Its fur was matted, its body lean, but what froze me were its eyes. They glowed faintly red in the beam of my lights. I passed it quickly, telling myself it was just a stray, maybe a wild animal. But a mile later, when I glanced in the mirror, my chest tightened. The dog was there, running behind the trailer. I pressed harder on the pedal. 70 miles an hour. 75. Still, it kept up, its body never slowing, its glowing eyes locked on me. For miles, I tried to ignore it. I turned up the radio, shifted in my seat, focused on the white lines of the road. But every time I checked the mirror, the black dog was there. No panting, no strain, just running steady, like it belonged to the night. The silence inside the cab was heavy. Even the hum of the engine seemed muted. My throat dried, and every swallow felt too loud. By midnight, the road began to twist through low hills. The dog disappeared from the mirror, and for a moment, I thought I had lost it. Relief washed through me like cool water. But when I came around a curve, my blood ran cold. The dog was standing in the middle of the lane, waiting. I swerved hard, the trailer rocking dangerously, but I didn't hit it. I checked the mirror, nothing. No body on the road, no shape in the headlights. My hand shook on the wheel. I told myself I was imagining it. That fatigue had finally caught me, but deep down I knew better. I had seen it too clearly, its red eyes burning into me. At 1 a.m., I pulled into a small truck stop outside Johnson City. The lot was empty except for one old pickup parked near the far edge. I killed the engine, climbed down, and walked a shaky circle around the rig. The night air was thick, the smell of dust and oil hanging heavy. That's when I saw the paw prints. Large, deep prints pressed into the dirt, circling the trailer once, then stopping near the cab door. I locked the doors, climbed back inside, and sat in the driver's seat staring at the windshield. I told myself I would just rest until dawn, but the air in the cab grew colder, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. I leaned back, closing my eyes for just a moment. That was when the weight shifted in the sleeper. Slow, deliberate, as though something heavy had climbed onto the mattress. My body froze. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The smell of wet fur filled the cab, thick and sour. My skin crawled. I forced myself to look in the mirror above the dash, the one angle toward the sleeper. For the briefest second, I saw it. The black dog curled on the mattress, its red eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Then it was gone. I didn't sleep. At 3 a.m., I started the engine again and pulled back onto the highway. My body ached with exhaustion, but stopping was worse. The dog wasn't just outside anymore. It was with me. Every mile dragged, the road stretching longer than it should. I checked the GPS, but the numbers crawled, the distance refusing to shrink. At times, I caught movement in the mirrors. A dark shape running alongside the trailer, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind. Once, I thought I saw its reflection in the windshield itself, as if it were sitting in the passenger seat beside me. The red glow of its eyes burned into me long after the shapes faded. Dawn finally came, pale and gray over the Texas hills. I rolled into San Antonio half dead from fatigue, parked at the delivery site, and climbed down on unsteady legs. When I circled to the back of the trailer, I stopped cold. The dust that clung to the metal was marked with deep scratches, long claw marks that dragged from one side of the door to the other. I made the drop, signed the papers, and drove away without a word. To this day, I avoid Highway 281 whenever I can. And when I can't, I never drive it at night, because I know the black dog is still there, waiting, running, keeping pace with whoever dares cross its stretch of road. And sometimes, when I park at night and the wind is still, I swear I can smell wet fur. Most drivers fear icy roads, reckless cars, or falling asleep at the wheel. But some of us have seen things on the highway that are far more dangerous than anything real. What I went through one winter night in the mountains of Colorado was something I will never forget, and it is the reason I almost quit trucking forever. It was late December, just 2 days after Christmas, when I was hauling a refrigerated load from Wyoming down into New Mexico. My route took me straight through the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, along twisting, narrow highways that are dangerous even in daylight. The air was thin and cold, kind of cold that stings your face when you step outside. Snow had fallen earlier that week, and patches of ice lingered on the shoulders of the road. The sky was clear, stars sharp and bright above the peaks. I felt small, just a machine of steel and headlights crawling through a wilderness older than time. I had plenty of coffee in a thermos beside me, music low on the radio, and my eyes steady on the winding two-lane highway. The run was supposed to be routine, but the Rockies don't care about routine. They have their own rules. Around 10:30 p.m., as I climbed a steep grade, I noticed a strange glow above the tree-line. At first, I thought it was a snowplow ahead, its lights bouncing through the dark. But as I rounded a curve, I realized it wasn't on the road at all. The light floated above the pines, bluish-white, almost like lightning trapped inside a glass sphere. It hovered, drifted slowly, then flickered out. My chest tightened. I told myself it was some kind of reflection, maybe from a plane or a tower. But a minute later, the light reappeared, this time closer, brighter. I gripped the wheel harder, my breath fogging in the cab. The highway was empty. No tail lights ahead, no headlights behind. Just me, the cold, dark mountains, and that unnatural glow. The grade leveled out into a long, straight stretch, and that was when I saw him. A man stood on the shoulder of the road, one arm raised like he was hitchhiking. He wore no coat, just a thin shirt and jeans, though the temperature outside was below freezing. His skin looked pale in my headlights, and his face was turned away from me, expression hidden. I slowed, not to stop, but because instinct made me cautious. But as my rig drew level with him, the man wasn't there. There had been no time for him to step back into the trees. He was simply gone, erased from existence. The shoulder was empty. My mirrors showed nothing but the fading beam of my lights. I pressed the accelerator, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The road twisted higher, narrow guardrails separating me from sheer drops into black valleys below. The strange glow returned, now pacing me on the passenger side, weaving between the trees as if it followed my truck. It wasn't a beam, not a spotlight, not anything mechanical. It pulsed, alive somehow, growing brighter each time it appeared. At one point, it flared so strongly that my dashboard dimmed, like the electronics didn't know how to react. Then the CB radio crackled, though I hadn't touched it. Just static at first, then a faint sound like breathing. The hairs on my neck rose. I switched it off, but the static didn't stop. The glow outside pulsed once more, and for a second, I thought I saw shapes inside it, figures, like silhouettes pressed against the light from within. By midnight, I was exhausted but too scared to stop. Every time I thought of pulling into a turnout, the image of that hitchhiker came back, pale skin and vanished face. So I kept driving, but something was wrong with the road. Distances didn't make sense anymore. A stretch I knew should have taken 10 minutes lasted nearly an hour. The mile markers crawled past, slower than they should. The glow kept pace, sometimes behind me, sometimes ahead. My headlights seemed weaker, swallowed by the dark, while the strange light grew stronger. My mind raced with explanations, auroras, military tests, hallucinations, but none of them fit. When I glanced at the clock again, my stomach dropped. It read 3:17 a.m. somehow. 3 hours had vanished, though I hadn't stopped, hadn't slowed, hadn't blinked. Finally, the road began to descend out of the mountains. Relief should have washed over me, but instead, the silence grew worse. The radio was dead, even when I switched it back on. My phone showed no signal. The engine itself seemed muffled, as if wrapped in cotton. I could hear my own breathing louder than the rumble of the diesel. That was when I noticed the lights weren't outside anymore. They were inside the cab. Soft glows, bluish white, gathering in the sleeper behind me. My mirrors reflected them faintly, shifting like smoke, forming and breaking apart into shapes that looked almost human. The cold deepened, frost creeping across the inside of the windshield. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles went white, whispering inside my head for morning to come, for the mountains to release me. When the sky finally began to lighten with dawn, the glow faded, the silence lifted. The rumble of the engine returned as if someone had unmuted reality. I pulled into a rest area just past Pueblo and killed the engine. My body ached, my head spun, and I stumbled out into the biting air. The world seemed normal again, trucks idling, birds overhead, the sky pale pink with sunrise. But when I walked to the back of the trailer, my knees nearly buckled. Frost had etched itself across the doors. Not random patterns, but symbols, circles, lines, shapes I didn't understand. They glistened for a moment in the rising sun before melting away, leaving the metal bare. I made the delivery later that day, but part of me never left those mountains. Sometimes, on winter nights, I wake in my bunk drenched in sweat, convinced the light is back in the sleeper, waiting. I never take that Colorado route anymore. Some things, once they've seen you, never really let you go. There are stretches of highway in America where you can drive for hours without seeing another soul. Most truckers know them well, and most of us prefer to cross them in daylight. But one night, I had no choice. And what happened to me out on that empty Nevada desert is something I still can't explain. It was August, and the heat of the Nevada desert still clung to the earth even after midnight. My trailer was loaded with packaged food, heading for California, and I had already been behind the wheel for nearly 10 hours. The route took me down long desert highways, the kind where the asphalt shimmers in the sun and turns to black glass at night. There are places in Nevada where you can drive 50 miles without seeing a single town. No gas stations, no lights, no people. Just sand, sagebrush, and the endless stretch of road. I was on one of those highways that night, surrounded by nothing but silence. The sky above was clear, stars so sharp they almost hurt to look at. My headlights cut 2 narrow tunnels into the dark, and beyond them lay nothing but emptiness. It was the kind of loneliness that seeps into your bones, reminding you that out there, in the desert, no one would hear if something went wrong. Around 1 a.m., I came over a rise and spotted movement ahead. At first, I thought it was an animal crossing the road, maybe a coyote or stray dog. But as I drew closer, my chest tightened. It was a man. He stood in the median, facing me, his body perfectly still. He wasn't waving, wasn't moving, just standing in the strip of dirt and weeds between the lanes. His clothes were hard to make out, but they looked wrong, faded, tattered, like something decades out of style. His face, pale in the headlights, was blank. As I roared past, I turned my head to keep him in sight, but the instant my cab cleared the median, he was gone. No dust, no movement, no shadow. Just empty desert again. I told myself it was fatigue. 10 hours of driving could play tricks on your eyes, especially in the desert heat. But 10 minutes later, my breath caught in my throat. There he was again, standing in the median, the same spot, the same stillness, as though I had never passed him. This time I slowed. The trailer rattled, tires humming on the asphalt. My eyes strained to take in every detail. His clothes looked like they belonged to another era. Slacks too short at the ankles, a shirt tucked tight, shoes scuffed and cracked. His skin looked dry, weathered, almost like parchment. I passed him slower this time, and as I checked the mirror, the blood drained from my face. He turned his head to follow me. The highway stretched on, each mile marker dragging by slower than the last. My cab felt smaller, tighter, as if the desert outside were pressing against the glass. The hum of the engine seemed too loud, the dashboard lights too bright. I thought about pulling into a turnout to rest, but the idea made my stomach turn. The thought of shutting down, of letting the desert swallow me whole, was unbearable. So I kept driving. Half an hour later, he was back. Same median, same posture, same blank face. It was impossible. I had covered at least 20 miles since I'd last seen him. There was no way he could be there again. Unless he wasn't walking. Unless he wasn't human. By 3 a.m., my nerves were shredded. My hands ached from gripping the wheel. My throat burned from swallowing dry coffee too fast. I checked the mirrors again and froze. He was sitting in the passenger seat. Just for a moment, a flicker of pale skin and hollow eyes, like a reflection that didn't belong. The seat beside me was empty when I whipped my head around, but the impression lingered. The faint smell of dust, the weight of someone unseen. My skin prickled, my chest tight. I muttered silent prayers in my head, begging the night to end, to let me out of this stretch of desert. But the miles stretched endlessly, the highway like a loop I couldn't escape. When I finally saw a green exit sign ahead, I nearly cried with relief. A small town waited 20 miles off the highway, and I was desperate for any sign of life. But when I looked down at the dashboard clock, my stomach twisted into knots. It was 6:41 a.m. Hours had vanished. The sun was already creeping up over the desert horizon, streaking the sky with pale pink light. I didn't remember the last 3 hours. I didn't remember the exit. And yet, my fuel gauge showed no drop, as if I hadn't driven at all. I finally rolled into a truck stop in Ely, shaking so badly I could barely sign my receipt for fuel. The morning sun was warm, ordinary, chasing away the chill of the night. Truckers milled about, swapping stories, drinking coffee, laughing like nothing in the world was wrong. But when I walked around my trailer, checked the tires, I saw them. Footprints. Deep, dusty prints pressed into the metal step-up to the passenger side door. Prints that weren't mine. Prints that led up to the cab, and then stopped cold. No exit, no return. Just a man who had climbed in and never climbed out. To this day, every time I cross the Nevada desert, I watch the median, because I know he's still there, waiting for another driver to pass. Some nights, the road feels alive. Some nights, you're not just driving across asphalt. You're driving into something older than cities, older than cars, older than humans. I never believed in the stories truckers tell each other about the places you're not supposed to go, until I drove that stretch of Route 191 in Utah one winter, and I realized some roads are not for the living. It was mid-January, near the end of a long freight run from Idaho to Arizona. Snowstorms had blanketed northern Utah for days, and Route 191 was a ribbon of ice and shadow snaking through the Uinta Mountains. I was hauling a refrigerated trailer of produce, which meant I had to keep moving. Delays could ruin the shipment. By 8 p.m., the sun had vanished behind the peaks, leaving the road swallowed by dark. The highway twisted along steep cliffs, sharp drops on one side, pine forests on the other. The snow reflected faint light from my headlights, making it look like the road floated on a sea of pale white. I had driven these mountains countless times, but that night, Every mile felt different. The wind whispered through the cab, faint and restless, carrying a cold that seemed to dig into my bones. My only companions were the hum of the diesel engine and the distant, occasional whistle of wind against guardrails. I remember thinking, no one else should be out here. Not in this storm. Not at this hour. And yet, somewhere deep inside, I sensed that I wasn't alone. Hours passed, and the storm intensified. Snow lashed against the windshield. Wind rocked the cab, and visibility shrank to a few hundred feet. My hands burned from gripping the wheel. My eyes stung from staring at the endless ribbon of ice ahead. Then I saw it, a shadow on the shoulder, moving too quickly to be human. At first, I thought a deer had dashed across the road, but the shape was wrong. Too tall, too thin, almost skeletal. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, as if gravity had no hold on it. I swerved instinctively, but the shadow didn't hesitate. It vanished the instant I passed, leaving nothing but snow and darkness behind. My chest ached with adrenaline. Something was out there, something that wasn't just a trick of the light. By midnight, the storm had grown relentless. I slowed to 45 miles per hour, my tires grinding against ice, my heater running full blast. The cab felt claustrophobic, the shadows stretching longer in the flickering glow of my headlights. That's when I noticed them, lights floating above the trees, pale bluish white, moving with an intelligence that made my stomach twist. They hovered for seconds, disappeared, then reappeared closer, pacing me as I drove. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, but stopping in the mountains at night during a storm was dangerous, and I had a feeling that whatever those lights were, they were waiting for me to hesitate. Around 1:30 a.m., visibility dropped nearly to zero. The storm's howl filled my ears, drowning out everything but the rumble of the engine. Then, through the snow, I saw a warm yellow glow ahead. A cabin. A lighted cabin in the middle of the forest, smoke curling from a chimney. Relief and hope surged through me. I could rest. I could wait out the storm. I pulled off the highway, tires crunching on packed snow. But the closer I got, the stranger it became. The cabin had no windows, just walls of rough timber, light spilling from cracks and seams. No path led to it, no footprints, no tire tracks except mine. Something about it felt wrong. I parked a safe distance away, staring, debating whether to approach. Then the lights inside flickered and went out. The cabin dissolved into darkness, like it had never been there at all. I climbed back into the cab, unease crawling across my skin. As I restarted the engine, I caught something in the rearview mirror. Two eyes, glowing pale blue, staring at me from the back of the trailer. I whipped around. Nothing, just my empty sleeper. I tried to focus on the road, tried to rationalize. Exhaustion, hallucination, but the feeling of being watched didn't fade. Every mile I drove, those eyes seemed closer, reflected in the mirrors, flashing at me in snow patches, disappearing when I blinked. My heart hammered, my vision blurred. I gripped the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to the world. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time no longer made sense. Every mile felt like repetition, the road looping, mountains repeating their shapes, trees standing in identical patterns as before. The storm outside thickened, though the GPS told me I had barely moved. The lights returned, not above the trees this time, but inside the cab. Reflections on the windshield, on the side windows, shadows moving just beyond the glass. I could feel a presence, cold and patient, circling me. I didn't dare stop. Stopping felt like giving in, letting it claim me. I drove on, hypnotized by the snowy ribbon of highway and the ever-present eyes in the mirrors. Finally, dawn began to touch the horizon. Pale sunlight struggled through the storm, turning snow to frost and the shadows to gray. I reached the outskirts of a small town, blinking against the brightness, my hands trembling. Relief flooded me. I pulled into the first truck stop I saw, shut down the engine, and sat motionless. The world felt normal again, ordinary safe. But when I stepped out and circled my rig, I froze. Frost had formed intricate patterns on the trailer doors, but these weren't random. Shapes, figures, faces with hollow eyes, screaming silently, etched into the ice as though the night itself had left them there. I scrubbed them away, thought I had destroyed the evidence. But every winter, whenever I cross those mountains, I swear I see pale eyes staring from the mirrors, waiting, watching, patient. I haven't driven that route at night since. I don't intend to. Some roads don't want drivers to leave. The highways are endless, the night is dark, and some things follow you long after you think you've left them behind. If you want more stories that will keep you awake, hit subscribe, and never drive alone after dark.